Good evening. Welcome to Backstory with Joan Goldstein. I'm Joan Goldstein, and the topic tonight is the future of newspapers. I have three very interesting guests. All the way on my right is Cliff Moore, who is the editor of the Montgomery News, which covers Montgomery Township and Rocky Hill. Next on my right is Rich Ryan, who is the publisher of US One, which just recently celebrated its 25th anniversary of the birth of US One as a newspaper. We had a nice party and I was there. And on my left is Fred Tasillo, who is the managing editor of the Princeton Packet. And we have a packet right over here. So, the question has come up that newspapers, as we know them, are sort of on the way out. And that seems like a sad thought. I found an article in the New York Times by David Card talking about the fall and rise of media. And he says, those of us who covered media were told for years that the sky was falling. And nothing happened. And then it did. Great big chunks of the sky gave way and magazines tumbled. Gourmet? It seemed as if it were as solid as the skyline itself. Okay, so there are people saying that the newspapers are dying as we know them, certainly print newspapers, but there's changes going on in the media in general. What do you think? Each of you are important people connected with local newspapers. Do you see your newspapers as falling into these same kinds of problems? Or do you think that your newspapers have something unique to offer, that communities really cannot live without them, or should not live without them? What do you think? Fred?
Well, I think this category of newspapers represented at this table have better prospects probably in the near term, because we cover very well-defined and contained communities and can cover them with a degree of attention that the larger dailies around us are no longer able to give them. But I don't think we're immune to the underlying erosion of the business model that supported newspapers for years, which is heavily advertising dependent and to some extent relied on subscriptions and newsstand sales. And that's really what's been undermined by technology, by the advent of the internet.
And your newspaper, the Princeton Packet, which by the way, there are 11 different newspapers out of that Princeton Packet, or out of the actual corporation itself. But yours is one that is for sale. Yours is one that does depend on advertisers, both of those things, correct. But the other two newspapers, not so, right? Rich, how is yours different? How is your newspaper different?
Well, we're a free circulation paper, and we rely entirely on advertising for our revenue. I have to say that this current moment is really a confluence of two things, I think. There is the technological change, there's the rise of the internet. There's also a severe economic recession going on that traditionally any kind of a recession will affect advertising probably right at the very beginning. In fact, I think we saw our advertising beginning to tail off probably 2 years ago, probably a year before the Lehman Brothers collapse. So those two things together have made it very difficult. And in terms of looking at the future, I would try to separate the two, because traditionally recessions end. And we can only hope that this one follows tradition and also ends. And that will make things better for us. The movement to the internet will not end. That will continue. And I think that really does prompt us to think about the way our business operates, the way we communicate, how much we stay in print only, and how much we also reach out to the new medium of the internet and make use of that to complement what we're doing in print. And that's a challenging set of conditions right there.
Right. What do you think, Cliff?
Well, I have to agree with Rich, for both reasons. First, the recession has made an impact. Second, the internet. But the recession will make a secondary impact, I think, for us because of the shift to the internet, it's going to accelerate that shift to the internet as advertisers get out of the habit of putting ads in print papers. I think that trend will accelerate. And this kind of paradigm shift has happened in the past. It happened with television and various recessions that shifted advertising from some traditional forms to television when that first came in. Well, the same thing is happening with this. But I also think that the projected demise of print journalism is mostly overblown, because apparently most of the failing papers have belonged to major chains that were, first of all, they were daily papers. Second of all, they belonged to chains. And thirdly, the chains engaged well, they incurred a lot of debt in the 90s buying various newspapers at the top of the market, and now they're stuck with declining revenues and can't pay or can't make their business model work, because it is a business. And those are the ones we hear about failing. The small papers, especially the free papers, are kind of a ray of sunlight in the journalism business, because a lot of them are still getting double-digit profit margins. I wish I was, but
I was about to ask you how you're doing that.
But some of them are, and we're kind of doing all right, because we can do something that the New York Times can't do, and that is report on a relatively small community that many of us grew up in and know people have our ears closer to the ground than people might in New York, and so we're doing better than some, and certainly better than the ones we read about failing and losing revenues and stuff. But I'm like Rich, I can date the recession to the exact week. It was the week of Christmas 2007, and we started getting advertisers calling in and saying we're not going to buy as much advertising as we did. We're a little concerned about conditions, and literally it was that week we started getting calls. And the official word was that yes, indeed, it began some period roughly then, but we're kind of like the canary in the mine in that regard. So.
Interesting. And Fred, you're actually working in transition for the Packet, aren't you? Because you're also doing a website for the Packet at the same time?
Well, I've been in, since I came to the Packet a little under 3 years ago, I've been involved with the effort to sort of transform what we do on the web. And much of my background the last previous 10 years was working with launching and working with newspaper websites. And yes, the scale is different, obviously, for a community paper. And we've been trying to find the right formula. We have a site for the group, and we've given it a Central Jersey focus. So the website is a bit more regional in nature than the individual papers are. And we're still tinkering, and that tinkering will probably go on as it has for most newspapers.
Okay, so you're not fighting it, you're joining them. You're not going to fight it, you're going to join them.
Have to do it, absolutely.
Yeah, right. There was an interesting article I found in, this was from the University of Iowa, alumni newspaper that I got. It's from an interview with the dean in the School of Journalism. And he says, they're asking him, how will the schools of journalism educate people who want to go into the field, considering all these changes going on? And he says, well, the core skills remain vital and relevant, he says. Integrity and ethics, really. Sourcing and interviewing, research, written, oral, and visual storytelling. The ability to work under deadline. And of course, we'll continue to teach them. So he says, well, actually, in educating someone to work in journalism, the same values are at work. Do you agree with that? What kind of education would you give people wanting to go into your field now?
Are you looking at me? I am a person who never took a journalism course. Now, I don't think that's that unusual. No. But when I think of the stories that have come around the past couple of years about ethical lapses on major newspapers, all of which have been reported on in the past and picked over and so forth, what they all remind me of is a great story of Dylan Thomas. Dylan Thomas worked for a little newspaper in Cardiff, Wales, or somewhere, and he was a sports writer. He was the last hire on the job, and they gave him the sports writer's job, which was an important job because people followed the sports. and kept the job until they discovered that he never did any on-site reporting, but he would wait in the bar for the rugby players to come in after a game and ask them how the game went, and he would kind of have a few drinks and a few more drinks and eventually turn in his copy, and usually he would get the score right, but the rest was fairly creative until he got caught. So occasionally that happens today too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. People take shortcuts.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I do worry about while I think that journalists need the same kind of education they have always needed, and your dean summarizes it quite well, I do worry about the level of knowledge that's being imparted to the young people of today, ironically, in this information age.
Mm-hmm.
In this information age,
Right.
they seem consumed and consuming more information, but bringing out of it less knowledge. And I see reliance on the internet as a kind of a red check research source, when in fact it's, as we all know, the internet is loaded with material that's erroneous. Once it's there, it stays there, unlike a print publication which has to keep paring things out, constrained by space, by time, and so on, getting rid of the incorrect stuff, replacing it with correct stuff. The internet just keeps getting filled up. Well, it'll never be filled up. It seems to be an infinite space, or close to it. But it accumulates more and more information which may or may not be accurate. The young people of today seem to rely on it to a degree that I find astonishing. And I think the skepticism that was inculcated in print journalists, people working on the police beat back in the early days, doing the copy desk fact checking and so on, that's all gone. Mm-hmm. Now it's cut and paste, insert, Control V, possibly for victory, but maybe not a victory at all for in the quest for knowledge. Mm-hmm. So I am a little bit concerned and hope that his words are taken seriously by his young students.
Yeah, but Fred, you have been you started as a reporter. You worked for the Long Island newspaper.
For Newsday for quite a few years.
Right, you've had a lot of experiences in journalism. What do you think?
I think that there's a real debate going on in journalism education now. I know some folks, former colleagues, who are engaged at one level or another in journalism schools. And there has been one trend, which I think is ebbing a bit, fortunately, that was too technological. It was, let's load these kids up with how to use this digital device or that digital device, and they need to be carrying a video camera, and they need to be carrying for one thing, the pace of change in technology makes that a relatively foolish emphasis. But the other problem, which is the one I think that Rich was getting at, was that the industry was getting too enamored with the idea that you could cut your costs significantly by having a reporter running around doing 4 stories, taking the pictures, doing the interview, sitting down writing maybe a one-source story, having no time to delve into any depth, do any real research, and just fill the space. And I think that's an alarming trend, which is driven in some ways by the economic stress that newspapers are in. But what is lost are the fundamental skills and also the experience that's gathered from being in a newsroom and having to compete and having to get past 3 layers of editing and having more experienced colleagues around to consult with. That's a treasure trove of experience that has been either forced out or bought out at newspapers all over the country. And I too worry about what young journalists have available to them as a resource in this path.
I have also this disquieting feeling about the internet. I want to see boundaries, I guess. I want to see editors. I want to see fact-checking going on. It troubles me because, as you all are saying, we have no way of knowing that what we find on the internet is in any way accurate. I'm not even going to talk about truth. Forget about truth. How about, simple accuracy? And the fact is that people pick things up, as you say, cut and paste them, but they don't think about what they put down. They're not really thinking about it. It's just, let me fill up a page. And that, I think, when I think of newspapers, what I love about newspapers is the checking, the editors, the fact that an editor has such an important role in a newspaper, and seeing that the integrity is kept, or seeing that they, as much as humanly possible, they can have accuracy. When I see the internet, I don't see the editor, and that's what worries me about it. It's almost as if people are making it up as they go along.
Well, the great vision for the internet is this idea that somehow we can put up a website and not fill it with our own material, but fill it with viewers' material. Let the viewers sustain it through their comments to each other, the back and forth, and we'll sit back and have this gold mine, you know, for which we do no work. Sit back and collect the revenues from Google ads, and not have any of the worries that we have in a print publication. Now, it all sounds too good to be true, and I think it is, but in this current economic state we're in, as Cliff alluded before, there are people who will try that. They've found newspapers too expensive. They finally get a little bit of money and they say, let me try something new, and the internet sounds good to them also. So it all is very alluring.
Right.
May not come through in the long run, but in the meantime, I think puts us in a short-term bind with a print publication.
I would take it even beyond that. I feel in a way it attacks the legitimacy of our system, our political system. When I think about abuse of information, think of the 1984. Remember the novel 1984, where they are now cutting things out that they decide don't want to exist. So that there are people sitting there, and when they no longer want that, that's no longer a truth because they no longer want that to be true or to be real. They simply clipped it out, and they were fast and quick with what we would call truth. And one of the important things about the newspaper, that maybe I'm romantic about it, but they really have the independence to be able to stand back and inform people of what they needed to know, inform citizens of what they need to know.
Well, 2 days ago, Joan, I got a phone call from a person who had been interviewed in our paper about 2 weeks ago. The story is now online, and he wanted the story changed online because he was afraid that the Christie administration would see it and would not like his sentiments, and that it might compromise some sort of opportunity he might have with the Christie administration. If you could just go in and change this paragraph, I'll be happy. I did not return the call. We're still waiting for the follow-up phone call. But I will take the print journalist's point of view that you just described, because I'm used to doing that. I'm not sure that a person who was weaned on the internet and is an internet editor or gatekeeper who sort of throws whatever up is going to have the same resistance to this very persuasive speaker on the voicemail, I might say. Will they have the same power of resistance to say, no, this is what our reporter captured at that point in time?
There's a second concern also. The younger people have, I don't know at what age, but grown up largely with the internet. There is a whole generation of people who've grown up with television, computers, and so forth, and electronic devices as a primary source of daily information, and who have no romantic urge for the printed page. I mean, I grew up reading the Trenton Times and reading the funnies, and it was an afternoon paper. I'd come home from school, there was a paper, and I'd read the paper. And from the funnies, moved to the sports section, to the front page finally, as I became interested in what was really happening in the world. Well, there's a whole generation of kids who have never done that, and their children never will either, because technology will outpace that. And so the reality is that, this is the direction it's moving. I don't have to like it. It's the way it is. The question for some of us is not just how do you make the ethical decisions involved in that. You can't really, in terms of the entire internet. We can for our own websites, and all three of us have websites, so we can make editorial changes and concerns there. But there's nothing that stops a Google from linking that to some other connected or however spuriously connected idea. Princeton, for example, keywords, the use of keywords. And then the other thing I was thinking was, as Rich was talking, 20 years ago, maybe longer, there was a failed TV show called Max Headroom. And some of you remember that, in which, you know, there's a kind of a character who lives in the internet who periodically makes an appearance, but the world is in the future, and events happen so quickly that immediately there's a rush of newspapers and press and media attention being paid to various things, and the point of which is to increase readership. And you can do polling instantly. You know how many people are on your site, so you can charge your advertisers according to how many people. And of course, the idea is to generate sales. Well, something like that is happening currently with this Tiger Woods incident. Today, you know, morning I read that a middle-aged woman has been taken from Tiger Woods. Well, ordinarily, who cares? A middle-aged woman is taken by an emergency squad to a hospital. So what? But it's Tiger Woods, and there's a connection between who knows whatever happened a week ago and who knows what happened today. For all anyone knows, she fell down a flight of stairs or you know, cut her finger. Who knows? Nobody knows, but it's on all the media. You know, somebody's been taken from, and it's done for two reasons. First of all, for whatever reason, people read this stuff. I mean, that's the reality. People read this stuff. It's not as if their filters go on and say, this is junk and garbage and has no, you know, it gets in the way of the real issues of war and the health concerns and the economy. Those are the real big stories. But everyone wants to read about whoever it was taken from Tiger Woods' home in an ambulance.
His mother-in-law.
His mother-in-law. Well, there
you are. I called
are.
him later today.
Right.
There you are.
In one stage of my career at Newsday, when I was the national editor, and I had the responsibility of overseeing the Washington bureau, and I can remember the editor at the time telling me, before I was going to go down there and start doing that, there were some things that were worrying him in terms of trends. And one of the things that bothered him was that, and this is in the 80s now, Washington journalists, print journalists, he felt, were getting too enamored with the idea of getting a guest shot on the talk shows of the day, the McLaughlin Group, you know, the early ones that are now copied 100 times over. First, because he felt it was a distraction, but also he felt that it changed their focus. And you can see that now if you look at how the agenda for journalists is driven by 24-hour cable news, even the political shows, which at least are attempting to cover important topics, get sucked into the trivia, and also the instant perception business, which is, you know, taking the president's pulse every hour, you know, to see if he still has one. Looking at the latest poll, the latest flash poll, and it does in fact influence newsrooms, because I can remember as national editor sitting in the newsroom at Newsday and having editors come at me with something they had just heard on CNN or NBC News had just reported something. So you have a trickle down that has a great impact on the agenda that print journalists end up following. And now if you combine that with the economic effect of cutbacks in major newspapers discontinuing their Washington bureau, relying on AP,
and the Trenton Bureau as well.
You get a real
State House bureaus.
Absolutely. You get a real degrading and dilution of governmental news, and particularly investigative reporting.
So this has implications really for beyond the business of the newspaper. It has implications for the country. It has implications for, let's say, our way of life or our democracy, particularly when I see a dilution of what is news and what is entertainment. And the lines get crossed all the time. And as you said, Tiger Woods becomes something, it doesn't matter what you say about him, but now anything you say about him will be of interest, whether it's his mother-in-law or his mother or whoever went to the hospital this morning. Other things I've noticed, for example, I remember that the New York Times, the front page was sort of the die-hard place where only what they considered the most important news would go. And now you see on the front page, gossip. I mean, I literally see gossip on the front page, and I'm saying, what is that doing here on the front page? So we seem to have diluted our sense of priorities and our sense of what might be important. You know, is that why people don't really understand how the economy is affecting their lives? Because they don't quite get the picture, or they're so easily distracted by entertainment. Is it unconscious, or is it conscious that people are more into entertainment than they are into information or knowledge? Oh, that's an old word. How about knowledge?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that one problem there is that the details, the complexity of some of these issues, economic issues, financial issues, what really comprises somebody's property tax bill, they're not fun to pursue, and they're certainly not really fun to read as a consumer, as a citizen. So people have to be highly motivated, and generally they only get motivated to pursue that information when there's some crisis. They get their tax bill for the next year, and it's gone way up, and they're in an uproar, and they react in one or two ways. They look for somebody to scream at, or they may dig in and say, let me find out what's going on here.
I'm hoping that's what'll save print journalism, or at least journalism that appears on a periodic basis, say once a month, once a week,